Forest Hill Community Church, we are currently running the Alpha course online. A couple of weeks ago, one of the videos shared the following story, which I think will illustrate to you the subject I'm going to talk about for a few minutes today. There was a young soldier fighting for the Union Army in the American Civil War. And in this war, he lost both his father and brother fighting and needed to return home to help his family. But he needed an exemption from the army to do this. So he went to Washington, D.C., walked straight up to the White House, as you do, and asked to see the president. Not surprisingly, he was told he could not see the president because he was not important enough. So he left the White House, wondering how he would tell his family that he would be unable to come home. As he was sitting on a nearby park bench, a little boy came up to him and asked him why he was so unhappy. He told him what had happened and why his family needed him. He also told him that the only person that would be able to help him was the president. The little boy said, "Come with me," and led him around the back of the White House, past guards, generals, high-ranking officials, and without knocking on the door, entered a room where, studying battle plans with the Secretary of State, was President Abraham Lincoln. The president looked up and said, "Oh, what can I do for you, Tad?" To which the boy replied, "Dad, this man needs to talk to you." This summer, all over the world, there were protests. Men, women, children, black and white, chanting "Black Lives Matter" as a result of the killing of George Floyd. As a church family, we came together to have an honest and uncomfortable conversation about racism. And on the 13th of September, we aired a conversation about racism towards those who are African, Caribbean, British. These conversations are necessary for us to see reconciliation and healing take place in our community, nation, and globally. Now, since those conversations and the protests this summer, many people have been asking, what can I do? So, what is allyship? As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "No one is free until we are all free." An ally supports and advocates for marginalized groups. It's the practice of emphasizing social justice, inclusion, and human rights by members of an in-group to advance the interests of an oppressed or marginalized out-group. Versions of it have been around for decades, first popularized during the suffrage movement and civil rights era, when allyship centered on anti-sexist and anti-racist activism. But today, in 2020, allyship is complex and multidimensional. Allies support LGBTQ rights, fight to normalize mental illness, advocate for the elderly, and promote accessibility for people with disabilities. So this month, we have been looking at the life of Jeremiah. And I just want to take some time to share an example of allyship from this book in the Bible. Now, Jeremiah is a prophet. He's often referred to as the weeping prophet. And to be fair, if you had to deliver some of the things that Jeremiah had to share, you'd be crying a lot too. Today's scripture is taken from Jeremiah 38, verses 1 through to 13. Now, I'm not going to read all of it, but to encourage you, for context, to read chapters 37 and 38. In this passage of scripture, Jeremiah is obediently telling the people what God has told him to say. It's a message about dying by the sword, famine, plague, so it's not a pretty message. And this message is heard by King Zedekiah's officials, and they are furious. In verse 4, they go to the king and they say, "This man should be put to death. He is discouraging the soldiers who are left in the city, as well as all the people, by the things he is saying to them. This man is not seeking the good of these people, but their ruin." The king replied, "He is in your hands," King Zedekiah answered. "The king can do nothing to oppose you." So they take Jeremiah and they put him in a deep well to die. Kind of harsh, right? But there was another official in the royal palace named Ebed-Melech, who heard what they had done to Jeremiah and approached the king. Verse 9, "My lord, the king, these men have acted wickedly in all they have done to Jeremiah the prophet. They have thrown him into a cistern where he will starve to death, where there is no longer any bread in the city." Then the king commanded Ebed-Melech the African, "Take 30 men from here with you and lift Jeremiah the prophet out of the cistern before he dies." And as you read on in this passage, you will learn that Jeremiah was dramatically rescued. Now, Ebed-Melech used his privilege to speak up and to be an ally for Jeremiah. He didn't know how this was going to turn out and what the king would do, because it's this same king that told his colleagues or his peers that they could do what they like with Jeremiah. No doubt Ebed-Melech would have known this, but as an ally, he spoke up anyway. Tad, President Abraham Lincoln's son, used his privilege to bypass officials to bring the soldier he had just met before his dad. Often allies come from dominant or majority groups, but many allies come from other oppressed groups and still use their spheres of influence to effect positive change for others. All allies are united by the common belief that everyone deserves equal treatment. This year, we have been exposed to some new words and terms like unprecedented, anti-racist, and white privilege. I want to introduce another term that I would like us as Christ followers to use: God privilege. We have it and we should use it. Hebrews 4 verse 16 says, "Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." I too need to be an ally for my brothers and sisters in Nigeria. This week we have witnessed the merciless killing of protesters because they opposed police brutality from the Special's Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. We need to pray. We need to speak out. We need to show up. We need to educate ourselves. We need to use our privilege to amplify the voices of the marginalized. It's not enough to feel guilty or be shocked. No one should sit back on their privilege, whether it be white, God, or otherwise. Why? Because we are our brother's keeper. And as Christ followers, we are salt and light, and change should come from us.